Hey everybody, welcome to another Wiser Wednesday. Today we are talking about what the Web3. So really interesting topic, trying to get our heads around what does it mean to each of us? You know, this is it means something different to every person I speak to at the moment. So I think it'd be really nice to try and navigate that in today's discussion and coming at it from an angle of have a network of a lot of Web2 entrepreneurs and companies that are looking at this and trying to understand, what does it mean for their business. So, start with, I'm James Potten, believe in a world of entrepreneurial success without burnout, have the slightly charred t-shirt to almost prove it can work. I'd basically like to just start with jumping in and introducing the panelists and to say, thank you, firstly, to Ida, who's on the call today. For most of us, wouldn't have met if it wasn't for Ida being the sort of co-founder of Katapult Future Fest, which is an amazing event out in Oslo. It's a confluence of tech, impact, investment, and it's a lot of fun. If you imagine sort of lecture halls by day transforming into like a sauna with a DJ by night, then you're just beginning to get a taste of what it's like. So absolutely brilliant. You're also an advisor for Indie Riot, and you're taking time out to deepen your studies at the moment, researching social and cultural values of NFTs. So perfectly placed for today. So welcome. Next up, Ismail, founder of Blockchain Labs and chief editor-in-chief for Web3 newspaper. You'll have making your own organic nootropics. I think Nick, you're into that as well. We can chat about that maybe a bit later. We met on a flight back from Katapult in 2017, and you were sharing your vision for what crypto, blockchain, what it meant. And I wish I'd listened to you. I didn't. I'm a little bit glad I didn't now, but anyway, look, there's so much. I think there's so much like that you were saying, and we'll dig into that. So look, welcome today, Nick, founder of Go Beyond. You've been to like over 50 countries. You've made and lost tens of thousands on crypto and NFTs. I've had a sort of similar journey, not to that same level, but look, we met at Katapult as well. We've also run an event together, and you now work as an advisor in the impact in Web3 space. You're joining from 13 hours ahead, so it's about 2 a.m. where you are, so thank you. Very caffeine charged welcome. Finally, Yaz, co-founder of Verified. It's a digital certificate platform for learners using the blockchain. So a use case, so we can talk about that today. At the height of your basketball career, you played in League Two for Bognor Pirates. Brilliant. So what a name. You later coached South Sutton Uni from 96 to 13th in 2 seasons, and you now can't walk on the flat without twisting your ankle. So Nick, again, you've got similar issues with your knees from basketball. So anyway, welcome, Yaz. So look, to set the mood, a bun fight is a fun night. So ask questions, jump in, let's make this a conversation. We're live, so no swearing, but obviously passion's welcome. And if you swear, so be it. So I'd like to do some just quick intros from yourself. So Ida, starting with you, could you just tell us, in less than a minute, your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, James, and thank you so much for inviting me. I guess my journey is as diverse and interdisciplinary as where I feel the space that we are in now. I am brought up from a pure artist family, and I think looking into the blockchain, I guess back in 2015, and understanding kind of the opportunities and dynamics for these, what I would say almost anarchistic ideas of how to decentralize and give the power back to the people, right? And I really love that. And then I think I spoke to one of the speakers that I met that I also invited to Katapult, Sharmeen Washmir, and she has written the book Tokenization, and she also came from this place of economics, art, technology, and so forth. And that's where I ended up now, a year ago, 1.5 years ago. Well, I'm a student, so in 3 semesters ago, I went back to university to really also do a deep dive into this from a research and academic perspective. So that's how I ended up now looking for the value of NFTs, but not from a financial perspective, from a cultural and social perspective, and specifically within the art and museum industry.
Amazing. Thank you, Ida. Okay, great. Ismail, how about yourself?
So my journey into Web3, or crypto as it was known then, started, I was working in ed tech. We were building online learning environments in Second Life. And one of the key areas I was focused on was rewarding the students for engagement. And we were using their in-game currency or in-world currency, Second Life Linden dollars. And we were fraught with problems when the server was down. We couldn't make any payouts, any rewards, managing it, tracking it. It didn't really have a ledger as such. A lot of it was based on trust, or there wasn't visibility. And when we were dealing with largely public sector institutions, we had a major issue there. And and then sort of friends who were in the cybersecurity field had started to sort of mine this new weird thing called Bitcoin, and then the conversation with them just spread, and sort of as you do, you jump into the rabbit hole. And at that time, the metaverse or that ed tech world we're beginning was not as exciting, so sort of transitioned over and set up the first blockchain lab. We focused on, there was only the Bitcoin blockchain at the time and a few sort of weird side chains such as Primecoin, but we started build applications on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then obviously met Vitalik and a few other lads, and they started working on the smart contract layer, and since then we've just been developing and growing and taking that wild and wonderful journey of crypto. It seems mainstream compared to what we were a decade ago.
Awesome, great. Thank you, Ismail. Nick.
So I guess from a career perspective, started my career in Web2, tech sales, and then got into the startup space in New York City. And I guess being in a city like New York City, where it's probably the second largest startup city in the world, or startup market in the world after the Valley, but is probably the largest market for finance. Naturally, just a large part of my network and community started being in the Web3 space. And so I know a lot of the founders or early team members of companies like Celsius and Galaxy and a bunch of other big names that used to be very glorious and now are less so. So naturally just started learning a lot about it. And I guess for me, I have I love to understand things well. I like to try to have a reasonably well-informed, well-educated thesis on where the world is going and how technology is going to impact it. And so blockchain or Web3 or cryptocurrency became a little bit of a pet project. And I definitely have found that you learn a lot more by putting skin in the game. So started playing with a little bit of capital in it back in 2017, did pretty well, didn't put in enough, it crashed, lost a lot of my profits, got back on the bandwagon around, right around the last presidential election in the US, because I was a little concerned January 6th would happen a little earlier and the US economy would be a little bit messy. And so I didn't want to hold too much of my assets in just USD, where it all was at that time. So I started buying, and then of course the rocket ship took off right about then. And so I kept putting more and more in, and it was a hell of a ride. And then wanted to understand it more from the builder perspective. So helped co-found one down, helping co-found another one now. and looked at launching NFTs and tokens and various DAO formation, legalities, tax, liability, company formation, structures, security law, all sorts of interesting things.
Awesome. So I'd love to jump into the sort of DAO discussion a bit later. And we'll also make sure that we're going to need to sort of explain. So decentralized autonomous organizations, DAO, try and jump in with some of the terminology that we use. But yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Nick. Yaz, how about yourself?
Thanks. Cheers, James. So I started my career actually in academia, was an hourly paid lecturer in sports psychology at Winchester University in the UK, went up through certain roles to the Director of Learning and Teaching and Director of Student Engagement at Winchester, doing projects internationally with Tansy Jessup and Graham Gibbs, who are both incredible professors to have worked with. But realised that there was a world outside of university, and I thought I should probably explore it. Worked for Instructure in Utah for a year, and then RefMe in London for a year before they were acquired by Chegg, and then Cortex on the South Coast. All three ed techs, all three as a way to bridge between technology and education. It was around 2017 also that I was introduced. Well, actually, I was introduced to Bitcoin in 2013 by Luke Deering, who's now the CEO of curriculum.com. And he actually said, "Oh, you should look at Bitcoin." I said, "Yeah, okay, all right, good one." Quick Google search, maybe not for me. That was possibly not a very open perspective for me to have had at that time, but I was quite distracted with children and a role, etc. But in 2017, I started researching again, realizing that the blockchain beneath it might actually be really interesting if it were to be applied to education. Bought a little bit of crypto at that point. It gave me a very nice return that year, and then lost all those returns over the last 5, which has been great, but still completely believe in the project and believe in what it can afford to society and humanity overall. But I was really struck by this idea, could blockchain actually be applied to education and create a lifelong learning ledger for people where their skills could be better surfaced, where they could actually find themselves aggregating learning from multiple providers, and eventually where they could actually utilize tokens to be able to increase, upskill, get more better positioning for certain roles. So we started validating in 2019, and we actually got our first blockchain-backed credentials issued in August 2020. I've been on the journey ever since and celebrated just before Christmas partnering with UCL.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks. Well, look, thanks for the intro, everyone. I'd like to dive in first, Ismail, to yourself. What do you see as what is the decentralized vision, as it were, and how much progress has been made towards this?
So the original decentralized vision, this sort of immutable ledger of store of value, I still think it holds. I think it's going to hold significant value going forward. I think you're going to start to see a lot more bonds and other value instruments lodged and backed by the Bitcoin blockchain. So I still think it's going to hold a large share of the market. The vision, I think, has morphed and is starting to evolve much towards the use case of what sort of 23 is, and that is having a token as a gated entry point to something, whether it's YouTube, as we just recently heard, the new experimentation, or much like what Twitter verified is going to be or supposed to be. You're going to see a lot more of the focus away from the underlying blockchain or the layer 1 and what its immutable qualities are, and a lot more on what the token is and what the experience. So I think we started off from the immutable ledger and a store of value that can be trusted and has a sort of 100% service level guarantee through its decentralized and distributed structure, to a much more what can the token do and what experience can the token unlock, or what can the token prove. So we're kind of going much, I suppose the decade long in the Bitcoin, is essentially a token, and it represents something, but it was a lot more on how does it represent that, and how has it come to being? And now we're like, okay, well, we understand that part, we accept that part to a large degree, but what is that token going to do? How is it going to improve my access, my privacy, my rights, my verification, or whatever you may attach to it? And I think the next year in particular, and the next decade, is going to be largely focused on that. Just like today, we're just looking at how Starbucks is starting to experiment with having a moving across its reward architecture across to a token based architecture, and that whole discussion was around the token and not the underlying blockchain and what it offers.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. So yeah, there's a sort of conversations moved on with it. That's super interesting. Ida, do you have any thoughts on this? Is there anything from your side that you're seeing in terms of the vision for the future of it?
Well, as I said initially, like I'm super on a positive on the creativity, the opportunity for decentralization, the opportunity for engagement and co-creation, and kind of the social and cultural values. And I think it's about a shifting of a mindset from a way that we have looked, and frankly, to be honest, just to name it, a capitalistic system of endless growth, right? That is creating products and solutions and algorithms and models that are not beneficial for our minds, our well-being, and so on. So I'm really positive to see, like, if we can shift over to a more collaborative, co-created on a very philosophical level, right? And I think those are the conversations that we had back in 2015, but I think we're still in this era where we're trying to figure out, like, what is our values, where do we want to go with this Web3, like where are we going to go with this decentralization? It is kind of a counterweight to something that we have experienced for a while that is not supporting us as human beings. So like I'm taking the very philosophical and ethical approach here, and I tend to usually do that.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Look, it's so important. I mean, it's where the sort of new ideas will come from. Hey, so is sitting with the unknown, as difficult as that might be. The sort of divergent thinking piece is super important, and obviously early adopters and trying to work out how to then sort of bring other people along on that journey. Yaz, Nick, anything from your side on this?
Just briefly to say that I think there are two main shifts that seem to be happening. One from a societal distrust to a platform and architecture that can create decentralized trust in a way that people will be able to know where things have come from in the future. For instance, if an institution has a wallet and it issues credentials, then you know that it's come from that wallet address and that institution. But the bigger one, I think, is moving from an era of speculation to an era of utility. And I think where utility and impact is being shown, that's where we're starting to see some really exciting movement around projects. They're the ones that are still hiring. They're the ones that are still growing.
Brilliant. Thank you. Nick.
I love that point, because I do think that a lot of now what people would consider Web3 is highly speculative, high risk assets where, it's Lambo moon time. And it's easy to get caught up in that fervor when you're seeing your portfolio go up 10% a day or whatever, and then suddenly drop 90%. A week later, wipe out all your gains, get wrecked, as the Moon Boys call it. But I think one thing that's really fascinating to me, and I'm really curious to see how it plays out, is the conflict and juxtaposition of democracy versus centralized control. Because I think there's so much conversation, and all the people that I know that are bullish on Web3, not necessarily from an economic perspective, but more from a social change perspective, are all sort of talking about how if we have more transparency, decentralization, and technology takes the place of trust, we can get to a better society. But I think there's a lot of pros of having centralized control. I mean, it's much more efficient. You can come up with much faster decision making. Generally, there's going to be manipulation and corruption in both democratic and authoritarian, more hierarchical type decision making structures. And I think that often what I see with the Web3 bulls are, and again, this isn't necessarily talking about it from a financially bullish perspective, but more people that are really like touting how they think it's going to change the future. As just the social change it's gonna drive, but so much of that is kind of counter to having centralized governance. And centralized governance, I mean, from a political standpoint, from a corporate standpoint, a lot of the things that they're thinking is going to happen would be essentially taking power away from central banks, from governments, from parliaments, from presidents, and from the executive leadership of big corporations that have mandates from their shareholders to have certain, behaviors and goals. So I'm really curious to see, real world examples of it being implemented and improving things, not just more at the philosophical perspective.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. And look, Nick, like sort of continuing on that. So, the reality of the situation at the moment. So you've been sort of right at that sort of epicenter of the roller coaster of NFTs. And as you said, you're like working in DAOs. NFTs, like non-fungible tokens, just to check in on some of the terms we use. Nick, like talk us through that, what has been the current reality, like in what you've been involved with.
I guess there's a few different types of a few standard types of NFTs, so the most common types. There's digital art, which I would definitely leave to Ida to give a better explanation of, because I don't have great understanding or maybe appreciation of art. But that's fascinating, right? I mean, I think it's acting somewhat similar to the physical art world. A lot of people talk about how it democratizes things and how it enables an artist from anywhere in the world to suddenly make a living from art. But I don't know the most recent statistics, but I'm pretty sure data I saw back in the heart of the bull run of NFTs was sort of showing that it was still extremely condensed, similar to the physical art world, where a small number of artists are getting the vast majority of profits. And of course, you saw a lot of the top grossing contemporary artists in the world today getting into the NFT space. I mean, I met with Jeff Koons to talk to him about the launch of his first NFT collection. He's the highest grossing living artist in the world by some metrics, at least. And it was interesting. I mean, it really seemed like a cash grab from his perspective as part of a combined physical digital art collection. And, pretty much the entire conversation was around the physical art piece. And there was just a little bit of conversation about the NFT. And that was reflected in the marketing material for Pace and everything like that. Secondarily, there's membership type clubs. There's investment clubs. There was a lot of alpha groups that came out. Alpha is essentially inside trading information in the Web3 space. What are some other types? There's some that were more utility based, but those weren't really being traded, so they were much less sort of well known. So an example of that would be like if you were to have your marriage contract be an NFT or something like that. So it's essentially a digital contract.
Okay, awesome. I mean, it is. Is there anything you'd want to add to the sort of reality of where we see things are at the moment? I suppose especially from the NFT. I saw a meme recently, which is ChatGPT being the new and NFT sort of being like forgotten a little bit in discussions, but I mean that's always the hype cycles, right?
Oh yeah, no, Web3 and NFTs is, you know, it's just so last month. So I am when it, like, I have a slightly different approach, and it's like I'm looking at the museum and the art space, and I'm looking at social and cultural value. And the thing is, like, NFTs as such, like as a digital art or a new media art, or kind of an opportunity for an artist to save an art piece on the blockchain, and as this kind of a storing unit, right? This is things that the museums have been work as an institution, as a holder of history and conserving history and collecting art and art pieces, physical art, right? That's what they do. That's their skill. What is interesting now to look at this, let's call it an industry, the museumist industry, is that it's fascinating to see like how these non-profit organizations now, for example, can be granted, like an artist and an NFT artist or a digital artist will give them an art piece on an NFT for their collection. What does that mean when it comes to they receiving like these high valuable NFTs, digital art pieces? Another part is it's like that industry hasn't been disrupted in the same way we have seen with the hotel or taxi and Airbnb and Uber and so on, right? So what is happening now, there is like NFTs as such as a driver for a new type of discussions, like who are the collectors, who are the curators, who are the artists, and so on. So it kind of just opens up like a new way of thinking about digital meets, I guess, history and museums and so on, and the art space and classical art space, and kind of stir things up a little bit. And I think that's where I feel there is a huge value, but very specifically within this space. So literally, it's like it also affects art students. So there's like different aesthetics. There's so many, basically different way of seeing of that industry that is not like a digital transformation as such, but actually is kind of forced to have discourses around, okay, what like, how should we collect these things? Should we receive these things? Should we buy these things? Who's an artist, right? So that's where I'm coming from in this space.
Excellent. Yeah. Ismail, do you have any thoughts on this? You're spinning out.
I mean, so the NFT as a word is probably the most powerful part of it. It moved that discussion from the discussion of the blockchain to a particular type of token, right? A non-fungible token. So now that it's in the lexicon and now it's global, you will now have an acceptability of different types of token. You know, the discussion of the smart token and this type of token. So that, that narrative or that NFTs has allowed a space for tokens to have an identity on their own, right? So when someone discusses an NFT, there's absolutely no chatter of crypto as such, or very little, or the underlying layer one, or any of the other sort of properties that we've been sort of camouflaged or hidden behind for best part of a decade. It is what is this type of token, and now you'll start to see the discussion of which I think fan tokens or engagement tokens and reward tokens. So that whole space has opened up, and the theory is that if it can be tokenized, it will be tokenized because it's a fundamentally better tech stack to manage tokens. So and we've already had centuries of tokens being used to represent other things. We've just got a much more intuitive stack to sort of play that in. And you've seen the last month, all the AI tokens have started to rocket up. So whatever the zeitgeist, the tokenized part of that, Web3 will grab that share of it quite significantly.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. Yaz, any thoughts from your side?
Not so many on the NFT front. I mean, there are some universities, Kansas State Student Union and a few others, that are talking about the use of NFTs as membership tokens, as Ismail was saying, but I don't think it's very mainstream in education as yet, but I'll pipe up a bit more later.
Yeah. Okay, great. I mean, yeah, you've got an actual use case, so it'd be great to talk about that. So how did you, talk us through how you identified the opportunity, and then how you went about building it, talk us through that journey.
I mean, I typically see serendipity play quite a significant role in my life. And actually what happened was I was working for one edtech company, understood a little bit about blockchain, was understanding about how it could be utilized to do micropayments online. There was a company called Coil that the CTO spun out of Ripple and actually created something that would do micropayments online. And I just started thinking, oh, how could micropayments allow us to have a different internet experience? How could some of these new technologies allow tokens to give us access to different memberships, web pages, other services, etc.? And then I also recognized that in my background as a director of learning teaching, I saw students graduate and they would be switched off their email, switched off library access, kicked out of the university with a piece of paper and said, good luck, we'll speak to you in 3 years, see how you're doing. And so I had these two experiences in my life thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if the use of blockchain could actually create a lifelong learner bond with the students that have left? Because we knew already, we could see FutureLearn growing, Coursera growing. We knew people were going to need to continue upskilling through their life. Wouldn't it be great to have a lifelong bond with the institution that you've learned from and that you feel, has added value to your life in a way that they can continue being in communication with you and you can continue seeking additional learning as you go through your lifetime? And ultimately, we just had seen other companies being led. And my co-founder and I just said, why don't we just try and validate the use of blockchain credentials to issue digital educational certificates for students? However, the interesting thing was we thought, brilliant, we'll solve fraud. There's certificates being printed off around the world, multi-million pound industry around the world. And we thought, well, yeah, we'll remove fraud. That'll be great. The conversation around blockchain now comes up for approximately 3 minutes because people now understand, okay, blockchain creates immutability. We can know that this is trusted. But what's really interesting, and it comes back to this idea of centralization, decentralization, is the centralized user experience that we've created that allows skills to be better mapped when we onboard academics and program providers, boot camps, whoever it is, where they're able to start looking at the skills that are within that learning credential rather than verbose learning outcomes that universities use. It's actually using a language that is more understood by employers and people post their university study. So we actually find ourselves building a Web2 user experience with the Web3 technology underlying it and actually invisible in many of the conversations that we have with users, partly because actually if you asked 3,000 graduating students to all have their own secret keys, their own wallets, give us those addresses and we'll make sure their certificates are issued to them. It's not mature enough yet to do that at scale. And actually we're getting there quickly, I think, but there is a bridge, I think, between those two worlds. And that's the experience that we've seen working with the universities and the professional bodies and governments that we're working with.
Well, really, really interesting. Thank you, Yaz. Edie, you've got your hand up, far away.
Yeah, I thought that was like maybe something that I could do because I really had this question, maybe Yaz and Yaz as well. And I haven't dared to actually put it forward in class with my professors. And that said, it's like I'm like my midlife pivot. I went back to university, but I'm not going to stay there. I'm just doing this like a couple of years, and it's really fun coming from I guess the tech world, the outside world, and then go back into university, but also knowing that I'm not going to get stuck here. I'm going to go back and apply this thing, right? But one of the things that I've been, and this is a very open and far-fetched probably thought, it's like, but is there an opportunity to make it a DAO, like a decentralized DAO organization, like university, like basically, because one thing that I see is like, one, I've been looking at PhD programs. In Norway, you actually get paid for PhD, but the salary is like so low, right? It's like nobody values that knowledge of a PhD, it seems, which is terrifying because we need that deep research. We need that deep knowledge now, right? So we're not always scratching the surface always. Another thing is like, if I would, as a student for a time, I could part of these DAO university, but also as, for example, teachers or professors, that they are part of like owning this university, and maybe we could like make more diverse global universities, and it could kind of take the pulse on what topics also that it's like put forward at the curriculum, and it could be certified and so on. And I'm just wondering, like, if there's an opportunity of that. Of course, I don't dare to put this forward to my university because they will be like, no, we're an institution and that is so important. And to Nick's point, right, we need these centralized institutions as well. I'm coming from working with museums. Like, I totally see that we need museums to be the cornerstone to preserve some of our history and so on. But I'm just like, is there a third option here? I don't know if you have some reflections on that.
I mean, I think it's a superb question, and I actually think it's very forward-thinking because there is evidence of it already starting to happen. Now, it's not formalized, or there's not huge entities that are formalized and that are structured in this way, but we're starting to see learning communities taking autonomy for their own learning between themselves. I mean, we see examples of it already in GitHub and other places where actually the community rate the contributions of the community, and actually that continues to further everyone's knowledge and learning in an informally, self-driven, autonomous way. And so I think it may not be that the universities end up leaning in too heavily into that space, but I think both can coexist, and actually you find your own tribe and your own, which can be now internationally located. It can have very diverse opinions and perspectives because of how technology is now structured to allow us to do that. And the last 2 years have accelerated that beyond measure. That I think there'll be a coexistence until one plays more dominantly, but I'm already seeing recruiters starting to look at learning communities online as to who are the most esteemed members of those communities, as opposed to going, which reputable institution have you been to? Show us your pathway that is very linear and reputationally centered. I think that the veracity of a learner within their own learning community is becoming more and more sought after for a data point. And I think a DAO could be an organization of that formally.
Yeah. So go.
No, I'm down. Like, I want to be part of creating this DAO university for sure, if anyone
Awesome.
for it. But I really believe that like we have this need for knowledge, and knowledge come from all places, right? Mm-hmm. How can we leverage to create and facilitate that knowledge that is also, as you say, maybe outside of the more linear systems, because we all know also that linearity might not be, well, that's constructed exactly. Kind of, and it might not suit everyone, right? The school system has, I think, destroyed many souls.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about it practically? So, and Nick, like, jump in here, Ismail, as well, if you want. But like, because I've looked at like how can you create a DAO, like, for entrepreneurs, for example, so that you meet on a bi-weekly basis, you get sort of FAQs, you get questions, people who turn up are contributing to materials that other people can learn from. So do they get like additional tokens as part of that network? Is that, do you see this sort of DAO university as this type of thing where people who are contributing to the knowledge within it are gaining more tokens as a result? Is that a kind of is that the driver to become part of it and to try and go on the journey with it? Who does that go to?
I mean, there are some examples of both. So one, 12 years ago, take any tokens out of it. I worked for a company. 10 years ago, sorry. And you could recognize other members of the team. And it was interesting because the people who got the most recognitions were not necessarily the senior leaders of the company. It was the people within the teams that were the glue, or that made things happen, or that gave everyone the time, that, helped people when they were lost. They were the ones that found, week after week, we're getting huge amounts of recognition. And actually, as a company, that's the entity or that's the individual you want to make sure is feeling super valued and feeling really amazing about being there. So there's an example where recognition already can happen in many ways. And I think that that's really powerful. From peers, from colleagues, from other contributors in a community or beyond. And then in terms of the other method, getting tokens for doing activity or engaging or adding value is already there. There's exercise tokens, there's all sorts of tokens that exist out there that reward certain behaviors, activities, but largely probably time. And that, I think, is it's not a huge step to think about how those two worlds could be combined. And I think there are people already starting to look at how tokens can go from learning to earning and, providing scholarships in certain ways or subsidies in other ways, etc.
Awesome. Yeah, Nick, jump in.
Core essentially does that, right? With not with tokens, but it's a Web2 version of recognizing contribution. I'm not actually sure if you can really use the points for anything or if it's purely just for cloud and reputational score. And I don't know if many people would reference their core score as a indicator of their knowledge levels or expertise levels. But I mean, I know personally I've followed VCs or other people that I've seen posting consistently good answers across multiple interesting questions that are relevant to me. And I think I've, might follow them to Twitter and then follow them there or on LinkedIn or whatever. So it is super interesting though, once you tie economics into something, because there's so much of our behavior. I think there's a lot of emotion tied to economics and to money. And, for example, like a very simple use case that I think a lot of DAOs would be trying to crack, or not necessarily DAO, but say Web3 organizations would be, making an introduction between two people, right? That's often a very high value action to take. It can lead to massive different course of result, whether it's an economic thing or maybe it's a travel recommendation or whatever. But in many cases, it is really interesting, because when you get into behavior types that many people would consider to be something that you should do for people you care about, then having an economic reward and cost associated to it makes people feel funny.
Super interesting, Nick. Ismail, do you have any thoughts on that?
I suppose that we built that sort of first kind of metaverse type university in Second Life, and you start to, I suppose we never had that economic underpinnings that the crypto blockchain and other sort of DAO type structures have allowed, right? So back in 2007, we never were able to sort of deliver payments the way we can now. We weren't able to manage those. There weren't no smart contracts to contain it. And a lot of what feedback we got was, those that care about university are largely going to the university for an experience, and that was the feedback from students. I'm going to X university because they provide this experience. I like their sports, I like their social life, I'm looking for a life partner, whatever it may be. So the ticks, the academic part of why they chose a university was usually a lot lower down the ranks than what we'd initially expected. So as we see the convergence of sort of better metaverse technologies, better sort of AI-backed sort of support services, which is 80% of the budgets we were spending was on administrative support staff and then sort of auxiliary as opposed to core teaching. So as we see other technologies converge, you're going to start to see the digital university model and a Web3 version of that as a much more viable alternative. And you can say the early sort of, if you look at Gitcoin or any of those GitHub type based reward systems, they're essentially saying, okay, you get a grant, you work on this proposal, on this project, and as a result, you can use this as your reference. So whenever you go for anywhere, you say, here's my GitHub profile or Gitcoin profile, and this is what I worked on. So, if we look at GitHub as sort of the first disruptor in sort of disrupting computer science as a degree, maybe you may start to see that in creative writing and et cetera, et cetera. So you'll start to see the university as a core function disappear, because it started to, the greatest asset of the university of providing this paid for experience may actually be its greatest downfall when in digital education provides a much richer or a much more insightful experience than current universities, which are great at providing sports clubs, teams, or et cetera, et cetera. So you may start to see this divergence, and I think it's an inevitable. You'll start to see a lot more decentralized learning groups emerge.
Yeah. So then it also, that spins off another, kind of industry of where people go to get the fun bit and the sports clubs and all of that piece, the in-person bit. So yeah, super interesting, Ismail. I guess I suppose, Ida, like in system thinking's terms, the existing system builds like basically builds the new system. So it designs the new system, and it obviously puts itself like quite high up in the hierarchy of that. And yeah, like we're seeing that obviously with stable coins and the central bank digital currencies. I think China are looking at the yuan, is so that they've sort of there's now this race by the existing organizations to try and like own this next sort of paradigm. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure if I like totally got the question, but like looking at systems, and I think from this existential and almost like spiritual perspective that I'm coming from, like in the shift to cultural mindset, it's like there is an opportunity to rethink the existing systems everywhere, not only like evil Web2 and whatever social media platform exploding our brain cells, but also looking at the larger picture of our society and governance, into like how can we kind of get rid of the things in the system, or just not get rid, but just like change and develop and evolve the things in our system that is not working for us, and that technology is part of facilitating. I read this article a little bit, also Ismail, to your point, it's like there are resources that are spent in, for example, administrative costs that are like could be redirected into, I guess, students or teaching and learning and education, right? And I think it also the teachers seems to, or professors seems to have that battle. So maybe we could, look at that part of the system. It was Douglas Rushkoff, which is he's written some book about Team Human, and so and he's like a media science professor, I think, first and foremost, an amazing writer. But he wrote very fast and early, like about the ChatGPT, because he saw already before, like in December, that his students were handing in essays that were like obviously written by some bot, right? But his point was actually like they're not attack this bot, but actually work with it, and kind of now maybe I can actually spend more times with the students and teach them critical thinking and like have one-on-one conversations. That is a much more profound, deeper work. So let's say they are, the essays or the university essays are dead because it's now written by AIs. But what does that, like he was looking at the question, what does that mean as for me as a professor, is that I'm actually opening up more time. So I think there's a lot of things that we kind of, could reflect on how to redirect and rethink existing systems so that they will be more efficient for, developing good humans, I guess.
Awesome. Anyone else want to jump in with thoughts on that?
Just on the stable coin. So all the research we're working on in the lab right now is more around the programmability, right? So traditional money in any M1, M2, any of the money streams you have, none of it is programmable, right? Or if it is a very, very difficult task. We've got to write a patch on the Swift network, and then we've got to work around on what the end user was paying on Visa, and the whole thing is completely complex and it's unmanageable, it's wieldy, it's costly, and whereas digital crypto money is completely programmable from the outset, and whether we like it or not, bots, machines, AI are going to form a large part of the much more productive economy, right? And there is people like myself who favor that human beings need to stop doing this unproductive work and start becoming more creative and working on more creative tasks. And machine to machine architecture and everything that's been worked on now and is operational and is on the final stage of the testbed. This crypto, digital, dollar, money, euro, programmable fits that much better. It's much easier to pay a program to pay a machine, reward a user a fraction of that for using that machine, and someone along that journey, whether we're working on bikes that sort of collect data and they take a bit of whether so the stable coins and CBDCs is that first part of that productive curve towards smart programmable money. And if you try to fit the old stack and you try to pay it, the workarounds that have to be done it's inordinately costly, right? It's equivalent to how costly it is to handle physical cash. So we move, the time it took from moving from physical cash to sort of credit card money and online digital banking, it was a span of 3 decades, right? You had half the globe move across, and you're going to see a much smaller span where we're going to move into smart and programmable money, and that fits this kind of fourth industrial revolution. It fits the whole sort of need for much more productive, and us to sort of resist. And I almost feel like it's when we should the initial databases came out and we would go out and say, hey, you don't need to use this yellow pages or this telephone directory, you can just use this online. And people would say, oh, we still need the physical, right? We still need it, and we still had that in the early parts of the credit card and what have you. That would be the same. It'd be like, hey, is this money not programmable? Is this not, can I not split it and make sure it comes? And and DeFi, it got sort of carried away in kind of the sort of remnants of an ICO requirements and fundraising, but its core components actually fit into that programmable money quite well, and it allows it to be staked and rewarded and what have you. So generally, as a stack, it fits into where we'll start to see machines and bots and AI being a large significant part of it. And I, for one, if I was to get if I was offered today someone would deliver a bot to my house and it would do some of the chores that I don't want to do, and I can just pay it out of my programmable wallet that I got, and it takes a little churn, and maybe some of it is staked, and that I would take that option as opposed to, hey, let me phone up a customer service or log on to a portal, type in my credit card details or whatever it may be. So all the other options are a non-starter with this economy. So and simply like we're working on a project where we're doing a bike rental scheme. Paying that by a stable coin that's programmable is just orders of magnitudes more efficient than the current model where the user downloads an app, enters his credit card details. Every now and then we do this kind of it's a special type of payment where you don't actually debit the payment, but you put a hold on that amount of payment, and it's convoluted. So let's not kind of resist the machines, as it were.
I bet there's lots of people listening who are still trying to, and it's difficult. It's the faster horses discussion, isn't it? It's tricky until you can really see like how it can be applied. There's a fear of the new. Yaz, you had your hand up. Any thoughts? Sorry, you're on mute.
Just to, I guess, speak for those people a little bit, there is some concern, and I completely agree with you. I think CBDCs are the future. I think cross-border payments are also phenomenally more efficient using blockchain. So there are ways that I think that the financial systems can be really more efficiently created, getting rid of Nostro-Vostro accounts around the world, seeing those trillions of dollars being able to be utilized around the world again. But there is an element around the programmable money depending on where that money is coming from. So if that is a central bank saying here's programmable money for citizens, to what extent could that be programmable? Could that be to a dangerous level where individuals could be told, here's money for food, here's money for clothing, in a way that it becomes almost used in a dictatorial way if it is a central bank issued currency?
Great. Okay, thank you, Yaz. Look, we're almost out of time, so it'd be great to go around the room. Nick, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, from a technological perspective, a lot of the cross-border payment issues, it's not really technology from my understanding. It's more resistance to change from the incumbents because they make so much money off of making it really slow and expensive. And that's where I see a lot of the challenges to blockchain, Web3, whatever you want to call it, actually having widespread global adoption and making a ton of change. In so many industries, lack of efficiency isn't due to lack of technology, or in most places technology isn't optimized and implemented in the best possible way. And I don't see Web3 as being this magic wand that will change it. We have social and political and economic, and it's all incentives based, right? And there's billion-dollar companies that are incentivized to keep things as they are, and there's probably a lot of politicians that are getting a lot of campaign contributions or other special benefits for not pushing change, right? And stable coins are theoretically wonderful, but we've seen so many of them have massive problems. I mean, if we look at Luna, that shows a great example as why we do want more trustworthy centralized authorities controlling currency. Obviously, if you want to look at countries that hit hyperinflation like Turkey, Venezuela, or whatever, then of course you have wonderful examples or terrible examples of centralized organizations failing too. But we also have, I think, a lot of the best examples of long-standing, stable economies based off of centralized central banks managing currency. that's a core economic tool of countries.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Brilliant. Like, so if we just go around the room in less than 20 words. So Ida first, what advice would you give someone looking to engage in the decentralized future?
Wow, yeah, join some WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups, or use those use the week to really, like, you need to inform yourself and don't jump on the hype. It's still very, very novel and early days, so take informed choices, I guess.
Brilliant, thank you. Ismail?
Pick an amount you can afford to lose. Spin the dice, go to CoinMarketCap, pick a random token, buy the token, and find out why it failed, why it succeeded, what it's about. Have it on your wallet, play with it. Just grapple with it. Be a kid with a token, and then you may come up with an experience.
Brilliant, thank you. Nick?
I'll build on Ismail's. I'd say, yeah, spend some money, get some skin in the game. Nothing major, but I would actually challenge you to try to find some tokens, whether they're NFTs or cryptocurrencies or otherwise, that you believe in their utility, and actually see if you end up using their utility.
Awesome, thank you, Nick. Yaz?
In under 20 words, do your own research. Make sure you do it as thoroughly as you can, and surround yourself with the best people that you can learn from in this space already.
Awesome.
It might be 21.
That's fine. We'll stop there. Look, thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, look, so we're moving from speculation to utility in the Web3 space at the moment. Stable coins are coming. If you love impact and saunas, get yourself out to Katapult Future Fest in March in Oslo. Yeah, we're entering a decentralized online world, so it will hopefully, the aim of it is to be like a fairer future. Our next Wise Wednesday chat will be with Nick Badminton, who's chief futurist of Futurism. So tune in for that. I hope you feel a little bit wiser this Wednesday for joining us. Just like to say a massive thank you to everyone who's tuned in, and to the panelists. Thank you today. And yeah, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.